Are you tired of self-doubt holding you back? Have you ever wished you could have the confidence to face your fears, go after your wildest dreams, and the tools necessary to live your best life? Hey there, amazing listeners. I'm your host and author of How to Grasp Confidence and Own Your Power. And I've made it my mission to help you break free from self-doubt and embrace confidence. Subscribe now and join us as we unlock the secrets to unshakable self-assurance. Let's dive in. At the beginning of this season 3 of Grasp Confidence podcast, I told my listeners, you guys, that we would be taking a little bit more of a spiritual turn. And I've kept my promise. We've had incredible guests that have shared near-death experiences, people that have rekindled their relationship with God, people that have taken us from their darkest times to their deepest, most spiritual and profound truths. And today's guest is no different. So while many of us are on this spiritual path right now, seeking for answers, seeking a sense of self, fulfillment, and our place in this universe, our next guest is going to take us through her journey of her spiritual confidence and tapping in to a deep purpose that she knows exists, not only for herself, but for all of us. She's a spiritual coach, an amazing brander and marketer. Her name is Diamond Drip. Diamond, welcome to the show.
Hi there. It's so great to be here with you and our listeners.
Absolutely. So I think I set that up for you pretty well, but people are wondering, what is this spiritual coach? I want to hear more about this and tell us what are you doing right now that's exciting?
Yes, absolutely. So the spirituality piece comes from the tools that I use in my business. For a really long time as an entrepreneur, I built this brand around business and mindset coaching. And a lot of people will note in the online networking space that space is very saturated. And so I was trying to figure out what my business superpower was. And through that, bumping into stuff, trial and error piece, that was how I found these tools that I use in my everyday personal development and growth, and then with clients to help them bring out their gifts and strengths in their business. And so what is exciting right now is every day I get to learn or work. And so part of the way that I'm designed is that I'm an investigator, I'm a researcher. I love going down rabbit holes of information. And so that was how I found this tool. I started to discover things about myself, my family. And now I get to dive into people and help them understand the way their energy flows, the way that they can tap into their strengths, the way that they can stand confidently in their power and really build a magnetic brand to attract the people who need their solutions.
I love that. Building a magnetic brand to attract the people that need your solutions. You know, I say this quite a bit, that I believe there's someone out there somewhere right now who's actually praying for the exact remedy or solution that we provide. And, you know, you're talking about these strengths, and I'm pretty passionate about strengths too, because I think we focus so much on our weaknesses that we don't even appreciate a lot of times our actual innate strengths. What do you think about that?
So what's really interesting is when I found this tool, my conditioning made me look at it from the perspective of what are my weaknesses so that I can be aware of them, so that I can stay out of the conditioned shadow versions of these. And what I found, because I have one of my gifts is like the gate of extremes. And so that's how I learn sometimes is I like go really hard and then I'm like, whoa, that was too hard. I need to like backtrack it a bit. And so learning these tools, it was no different. So when I first discovered human design, I was like, oh my gosh, this can tell me what my strengths are. And that's great. A lot of them I know already, but I need to really hone in on these other pieces. And it became exhausting trying to learn everything that I didn't have in this system, in this framework for how you understand how your energy flows. And in that extreme, I looked at my chart again and I was like, wait, especially, and you know how divine timing is always working. I think it was a webinar. It might have been a podcast. I don't know. But essentially what was said was, our soul chose the missions that we needed to be successful in this lifetime. So if we don't have something, it's because our soul felt as though we didn't need it in this lifetime to do what we needed to do here. And with that perspective shift, I was able to really look at like, okay, well, if I just have to get to know what I have, the wisdom that I bring, that's a lot less studying and diving in than these perceived weaknesses that I don't have. And so it's really interesting that you asked that question because initially I dove into the weaknesses because I was like, oh my gosh, let me see what I don't know so that I can avoid showing up in that light. And then it was empowering to then move to, well, what do I have? What do I bring to the table? And to just focus on that and not worry about the stuff that I didn't have.
Oh my gosh, so much wisdom there. I mean, honestly, we can really focus all day, if you let us, on everything we don't have. My list is probably as long as the Dead Sea Scrolls of what I don't have. But you know what? If I focus on that, I will always feel like I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And, when you compare yourself to other people, it's a big thief of joy, but it's a really big thief of confidence too, don't you think?
Absolutely. Because you're constantly, like when you're stuck in this comparison, you're making yourself less than, and we don't need any more of that. We already have a whole culture telling us, right, these messages telling us that we're less than. So we don't need to add on to that.
Yes. And finding these strengths and aligning with them does build confidence. So you go from focusing on what you're lacking to what you already have inherently within you, inside of you. And, if, who was it? If we judged a fish's ability to climb a tree, right? It would go the rest of its life thinking it was a failure.
Yeah.
It's not a failure. It's simply giving it an impossible task based on its design.
Exactly.
That's pretty powerful. And, when you and I started this conversation, I said, what is this behind you? I love the background, by the way. And for the podcast viewers or listeners who are just listening to this, they can't see it. But behind you is this mural of this fantasy. It looks like big, gigantic mushrooms, a fantasy land. It looks like a dream. And I asked you about this. I knew it had to be significant in some kind of way. And you mentioned it was part of the spiritual path that you're on as well. I have to ask, you going down this spiritual path and figuring out these strengths, how was that path for you? How did that journey go?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder when I was 14. And so for a really long time, the depressive symptoms of that disorder, it was following me around like this dark cloud. And so in August of 2022, I participated in a clinical trial that used psilocybin, which is the active component in magic mushrooms, to actually heal my depression. I was able to gain things like self-forgiveness and self-compassion and really take a look at my life and see the areas where I was burning out because I was trying to do all the things. I was trying to validate myself with things outside of myself. And it really made me take a closer look at some of those areas and really make a make a change. I like to say that that trial was a catalyst for my path to spirituality, because we live in a culture that prizes logic and certainty over flow and intuition. And so because of that, I would just, my to-do list had never ended. And so the trial, it really, like I said, it helped give me self-compassion. I wasn't sure how to integrate all of the things that I learned from that experience. The trial was only 15 weeks. There was some integration afterwards with the trial therapist, and then I have my own therapist, but it was still a lot of stuff that I had to figure out on my own. And I say all the time that I stumbled around for like a year trying to figure out, okay, higher consciousness me, she was amazing. She was so graceful. She was so forgiving. She was so easy breezy, go with the flow. I'm like, that's not me at all. Like, I'm always, right, we as humans, we have this illusion of control. Like, if we plan the perfect plan, then that's what's gonna, like, no, life is happening while we are busy making plans. And so the experience, it was difficult to integrate. And these tools, they helped me figure out the pieces of me that I saw in that higher consciousness state and figure out how to tap into them in a really practical way.
Wow. That's a lot.
It is.
So being diagnosed with bipolar at 14.
Yeah.
I want to go back to that time just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people who are listening to this, because we know statistically that a lot of us are suffering from depression.
Yeah.
And this sense of not enoughness, this sense of I can't catch up, this sense of a forever expanding to-do list. And the thinking that, we kind of get caught up in the thought of we're just this commodity, this cog in a machine, right? And it leads to a lot of depression. And I've been there too. I know what that feels like. But how was it? I want to just a contrast before you sought this treatment.
So before the treatment, I had experimented with plant medicine to treat the symptoms. I was a big proponent of cannabis because it helped me sleep. A lot of times, insomnia is a huge symptom of depression. And so cannabis would help me sleep, but it didn't necessarily help me feel better. It just kind of made me comfortable going along with the motions. And so, before the trial, I was doing a lot of things with the focus of, okay, they say we need these things in our business. So let me go ahead and make things happen. Let me push, let me force. And it was draining. And so on top of the depression that I was experiencing, from my diagnosis and from my childhood, I was removed from my mom's care when I was 15 due to child abuse and neglect. So dealing with all of that, and it was heavy because my mom, she was undiagnosed borderline personality disorder with narcissistic tendencies. And so my whole childhood, I grew up making myself wrong for things that weren't actually my fault. And then when I tried to go out and have my own relationships, I was made wrong for that because my mom really just wanted me to herself, in a way that she could control so much that my aunt would sometimes be removed from my life. Like her own sister would be removed from my life because she felt like we were getting too close. And so I grew up, and it's interesting because yes, that was then and this is now, but it's the wounding that happens. You think that you're over it, and then you get to a point and like 6 months ago, I realized that my inner teenager was giving me hell. Because every time I would try to, take this quantum leap in my business, she was just kind of there in the background, like silently doubting everything, like rooting against it because she felt or feared that if she gained the success, somehow somebody would take it away. Somehow she would, like, the rug would be pulled out from under her because every time she got close before, it was pulled out. And so dealing with those dynamics, it was interesting, to say the least. But, you know, that's why personal growth, personal development is so important in your business, because these things that we think that we're over, like, they're actually holding us back in our businesses. Like, for the longest, I always thought that I was afraid of failure. Don't get me wrong, right? There is still that element there, but I didn't even realize that you could be afraid of success as well.
Yes. Oh my gosh. We don't talk about that enough, right?
Exactly.
And I'm glad you brought up childhood trauma. And, you know, this podcast is based off of my book. And my book talks about my journey of childhood trauma. And in all of the ways, at one point in time, it was really an anchor to the past. And it just kept me tethered to this reality that I wanted to get away from.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are going through some type of trauma. So this is a really relevant topic, because a lot of our listeners are looking for the answer. They're looking for hope. They're not maybe sure. But one thing I know about trauma, just like you said, it continues to manifest in our lives if it's unaddressed. And when I became an entrepreneur, maybe you'll appreciate this, I spent a ton of money on all of these different types of coaching and all these things, and nothing worked. Tons of money. Nothing stuck. It wasn't until I started taking that money, instead of investing it in my business, started investing it in myself, did I actually increase my success, and not just a little bit. It was like a different universe of success I experienced. After I started investing in myself, wrote my book, started speaking on stage, got accepted into an international TEDx talk, wrote my second book. I find it funny that all of that money I spent on trying to build my business didn't work, but as soon as I invested it back in me, wow. What do you think about that?
I really resonate with that. Like you said, you thought I would appreciate it, and I do, because when I first began this entrepreneurship journey, I started off with a product-based business, which I always say allowed me to grow a successful business in the blissful ignorance of my own self-worth. Because when you're selling the product, it's like, okay, do they like it or do they not? You can run sales, like, it's very straightforward. But when I made the pivot after the trial to do more purpose-driven work and really work with people on a service-based model, it was like, well, you're the product now. Like, you're not having these deliverables like you used to anymore. And my brain, right? And so, like you, I invested in these programs. Like, I was in a year-long business coaching program, which it taught me a lot of things, but some of that money could have been allocated elsewhere for sure. Because there were a lot of, right, the proven strategies and the frameworks. But as we know, especially like with my understanding that we are literally all designed differently, like our soul blueprints all look different from one another. So of course, you know, these step by steps, like, it's not going to work for everybody. There are going to be some people who, you know, they fall outside of that. And so the business coaching program, it was teaching me a lot of things. And I was like, okay, well, I'm struggling with sales, so maybe I need a sales coach. Got a sales coach. And I learned these different ways of presenting information. And it wasn't until, I was at this point where I was like, well, I'm learning all this stuff about, service-based business and speaking and things like that. So, like, that's good. I'm learning the sales piece because obviously that's what you need as well, but something's still missing. And it wasn't until I made the investment with a life coach where we literally for 6 months met every week for an hour. And we were just talking about the old stories that my brain was telling me that I was accepting the limitations of. And that was what was holding me back from really stepping confidently into my power. And, you know, I recently compiled all the summaries of notes there. And it was just so interesting to see how, as we were talking about before we, hopped onto the podcast, like divine timing. I was looking at the summaries and we were doing a lot of work around, you know, spirituality and my life coach, she was in the Air Force as an aerospace engineer. So she dealt a lot with quantum physics. And so we would use these, power of imagination, Neville Goddard, just kind of like rewiring the brain to accept, and around the same time that I was finally becoming open to quantum physics, to spirituality, to these higher states of consciousness and tapping into those and really getting to know your higher self in that way, that was when I was in a random networking meeting and someone was like, "Do you know your energy type?" And my rabbit hole began, and it has opened up so many doors. This investment in myself and not making myself wrong for the way that I was designed like I was before.
That, yes, not making yourself wrong for the way you're designed. Take us down the rabbit hole. Dare I say? I do. I want to be like Alice. I want to go down the rabbit hole. Tell me a little bit about these energetics that you're speaking of.
Yes. So I use two tools in my business. One is human design. The other one is Gene Keys. And so human design is a synthesis of a bunch of different sciences that actually create this map or this blueprint of how your energy flows. It shows you areas where you're more likely to lean into outside noise. So what your family's saying, what your friends, society, especially these cultural contexts that we live in. And then it gives you insight into your strengths. It gives you insight into the solutions that you're meant to nourish people with from the wisdom of your life experience. One of the things that my business coaching program always used to say is your life is a PhD preparing you for the insights and help that you're going to impart upon other people. And so human design, it really takes that literally, because if you look at some of the things on the side of your chart, you can see who your people are. Are you here to work with authority figures? Are you here to work with people of influence? And once you know who your people are, what are the solutions that you're supposed to nourish them with? Where is definition in your chart so that you can give wisdom and insight and help other people get through, this incarnation, if you will? It gives insight into your purpose. Like, are you here to have a really personal journey? Are you here to heal yourself? And then if you want to, spread that information and heal other people? Or are you here to have a transpersonal journey? Do the people who you come in contact with, the karma that happens in between those relationships, like, is that what helps move you along your purpose? So it gives so much insight into how to make your best, most aligned decisions. And then we were talking about trauma earlier. And so Gene Keys, I really love bringing that up for the trauma piece because it allows you to pinpoint different areas in your life where maybe you've lived in that traumatized, kid in the corner, like shadow version of yourself. And where can you make the conscious, right, with awareness of what the issue is, where can you make conscious strides to actually transform and be a vibrational match for what you're here to do in this lifetime? So that's like high level, but it's been an amazing journey. So much so that, like I said, I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 bipolar 2 disorder when I was 14. And learning that in human design, I have what's called emotional authority, which, by the way, 50% of the population has emotional authority. And that just means that we live our life in these up and down waves. And so for us to make our clearest decisions, it's better if we wait. if we sleep on it, if we give ourselves time to ride that emotional wave and come to a place from an emotionally neutral place. And so even that was empowering, right? Bipolar 2 disorder versus emotional authority. Let's peek.
Well, I'm going to have to do my gene keys after this.
Yes.
For sure, because I'm very interested, right? It's so fascinating and it is so empowering on so many different levels, because the best thing, I'm hearing about all of this is that we each have a place. We each have a unique purpose. We each have a design. And it's not about becoming someone that you're not. It's not about fitting into some box, because I certainly don't fit into a box. I can tell you certainly don't fit into a box, right?
Right.
And I use energy in my own way. And I think you do too. My clients that I work with, as far as, coaching goes, they tell me all the time, how did you know? How could you have known? Things like that. And I can just feel it. And I bring opportunities to people or direct people to one another. One of my natural gifts is just this ability for connection. And through some energetic alignment that I don't even really have words for, I'm able to do that. I'm able to bring people together. And just like this podcast today, I didn't know, this is the first time you and I met. I wasn't 100% sure where this conversation would go. I allow the energy to flow, and I allow the conversation to go in the direction it's supposed to go, because ultimately I know that our energy is going to serve the need of someone right now who's listening. Someone that needs to hear this message. That's so powerful to me. For me, it gives me a lot of sense of fulfillment and purpose. What do you think about that?
I think that's beautiful. And I'd actually be curious to see what in your energy is showing up there with the connections piece and the being able to guide and interpret energy in that way and just kind of let it flow. Because a lot of what you were saying, you were like, I don't have the words for it. That's what human design does. It gives us the words that we don't know that help validate and confirm, like, this is what's happening. Like, it's not in my head. I may not have, I use that example all the time. I may not have like a 10-point presentation or what it is that's happening, but I can, like, I know that this is what's happening. And it kind of gives you that language.
It's fun. Well, it'll be on my homework list today. I'll do it today. But it really is so inspiring for me. And, in my book, I talk a lot about strengths. And the fascinating thing is that, when we align with our strengths, we can become really, really confident. And when we really know who we are and our design and what makes us us, it empowers us to ultimately serve the collective at a much higher place. You kind of transfer from that like self-service to a service of many, and really benefits so many people as a result, just from you being you. And we've talked a little bit about, energy today, but, the highest vibration is just authenticity, being yourself. And people really can feel that when you are your authentic self, and they respond to it. So I'm pretty passionate about this, but, in a world that tells us to fake it till we make it, just put a mask on and pretend. That's real advice that's out there. I say don't fake anything.
Yeah.
Just be your authentic self and align with the gifts that you're naturally designed for.
Exactly. I feel like so many of us, I was at a workshop this weekend. I was a panelist, and one of the presentations after that initial morning first half was around business development. And one of the presentations was about like leadership and being on video. And for a lot of, it was a women focused event, which I always love those. For a lot of the women there, you know, we used this Mentimeter where you could type in a response anonymously and then kind of see what trends there are without, you know, having that be tied to you. And so a lot of what the women were putting down was like, why aren't you on video more? They were answering this question. And for some people, you know, it was like planning, I'm busy. But a good portion, like at least 3 or 4 of the responses were around fear of judgment. And one of the things that I'm coming to understand is that, especially because there's this book by Bronnie Ware where they worked with people who were at the end of life, and basically she asked questions around like their biggest regrets, and the number one response was basically not living like authentically as them. They were living who they were told to be or who they were expected to be. And they really like cut themselves off from a lot of things that were going to bring them joy. Like that was like number 3, I think, was like not saying yes enough to myself. And literally when you start to get into this spirituality kind of conversation, you start to understand that this incarnation, like it's not the end. Like it's one of many. Like some of us have been here, we've incarnated before, we're bringing knowledge from past lifetimes. Some of us are here like super clean slate. This is our first incarnation and we're creating karma for our next lifetime. And it really helps you see like the magnitude of it. And it's like this life, right? This incarnation is too short to be anything other than the way that I was designed. It takes way more energy to try and conform and to try and twist and to try and mold yourself to fit into a box when you can just be you and have the people. Like when I remember when I was first making the transition into this spirituality piece, I was around a lot of men who were very masculine energy. And when I started talking about like trusting your intuition to lead your business decisions, they were like, what is she talking about? This is different from the AI tools that you were once speaking of. And there was a point where I could have just, you know, pivoted back out of fear and like, okay, well, people aren't accepting me. But the universe, it would bring me people where if the conversation was flowing enough and I felt like we vibed, right? I felt like the energy was there. I'd ask, like, do you know your energy type? Do you know your human design? And that keyword, right? It was like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm a blah, 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 blah. And it would give me hope to keep moving on this path because I wasn't hiding that part of myself. I was leading with it and letting the people who resonated with what I was saying, my message, right? This is all branding and marketing, right? Your message is going to be the thing that people attract, you know, associate with your store, your brand, your et cetera. And that's going to be the thing that pulls people in. Do people know that I do business coaching? Yeah, absolutely. I spend a lot of time building that brand, but now it lights me up when someone's like, oh yeah, I was talking to so-and-so and they said that they were a generator in human design and I thought that they would be a great fit for you. I'm like, oh yes, absolutely. That is 100% my person. I would love an introduction. But really, yeah, letting that be the thing that magnetizes.
This entire experience, who did this help you become?
So this entire experience has helped me become someone who recognizes that the only limitations are in our mind. Our old stories, our things that we're holding on to, our trauma, etc., those things, they're holding us back. And so there have been so many times where I've leaned into the science of these tools because that was all I had in the moment. I was like, I don't have logical reasoning for why I'm doing this other than the fact that it will bring me my signature theme, which is satisfaction. Like I'm leaning into what lights me up. And it has helped me, right? We were talking about this earlier. It has helped me do things that I normally wouldn't have otherwise gone for. Like I am an author now. And that was a decision that I made to become a part of an anthology. I felt so much imposter syndrome. My inner critic was very loud when I was joining that project, but I pushed myself through it. I understood how my strengths have earned me a place at the table, how my story is important enough to tell, because it may not be like, the older women who were a part of that book, but it can inspire and bring in a whole new audience as well as resonate with some of the things that other people have gone through. And that book has now gone on to become best-selling and award-winning. And so now that's a thing that I never would have gone for necessarily if I wasn't just being a part of the experience. And then, walking the runway at US Black Cannabis Week. Like, that was something that I'd always wanted to do. But my mom, she kind of took away that modeling opportunity for me. Younger, it wasn't for US Black Cannabis Week. It was for Peace Tea. I don't know if those are still around, but leaning into that satisfaction, it helped me become this person who is leaning into joy. And other people see that and they're like, oh my gosh, well, if you can do it, because I knew you when you were doing X, Y, and Z, and I've seen you pivot, I've seen you lean into what lights you up. It creates this ripple effect of, for lack of better phrasing in this moment, hope that other people can make these shifts, that they can lean into. It's helped me become this influential person without even really trying to be, because I was just being authentic. I was leaning into my strengths. I was doing what lit me up. And that is the best feeling ever, is when you're not trying to fake it. Because it's one thing when you fake it until you make it, and then you get all the things, and then you feel unfulfilled because you weren't genuine that whole time. And now, you're in this position where it's like, well, do I let go of the brand that I built because it doesn't fit me? It's not fulfilling. Like, you get into these messy situations.
Absolutely. Oh, so right on. Well, I really enjoyed this episode. This was a lot of fun, and it gave me a sense of hope, because I think the cure to a lot of our problems is right within. Yes. And we can look outwardly for things all day long and always come up short. But when we look inside us, that's where the real power and potential lies. So I hope this gave everyone a lot of hope today, a lot of inspiration. Diamond, what are the best places to find you and connect with you on?
Yes. So the best place is my website, diamonddripconsulting.com. I always encourage listeners to pull their free human design chart, because if you just start experimenting with your strategy and authority, you'll start to see synchronicities and signs and things that this is what you're here to do. So I always love for people to pull their chart. My top 2 places as far as social media are going to be LinkedIn and Instagram, and that's on my website as well.
Wonderful. Well, this will be the first of a couple conversations probably, but I loved it. Loved the show. Loved the interview. Fantastic advice as always. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for everyone who tuned in today. Guys, thank you for your support and your continued efforts, because guess what? We are in the top of the personal development podcasts in many countries, actually more than a few countries, which is incredible. Thailand, Hungary are among the few that we are in the top 10 in personal development podcasts. So truly incredible. So thank you for your support. Keep sharing these shows with your network, with family, with friends. And that's a wrap for this episode of Grasp Confidence. Thank you for joining me today and investing in yourself. Remember, building confidence is an ongoing journey, and each step you take brings you closer to the empowered, fearless version of yourself that you were born to be. Don't forget to visit my website, follow me on social media, and purchase my book, which is available on Amazon. Thank you for listening. We will see you on the next episode. stay confident.